This is not the Five Stack. The Five Stack is coming up at 3:00, but this is Narrative Live, and we do have two of our favorite people here, Ellie Leonard from The Panicked Writer, and Lev Parnas is here. Everybody knows Lev from Lev Remembers, and Lev for Congress these days, running as an independent for the U.S. Congress. Lev Parnas is here. Everybody knows Lev. Hearing myself back at me.
Hi, we get you twice.
Okay, well, there you go. It's worth it. We have lots to discuss today. This is sort of a freewheeling conversation, but it's also a conversation that has resulted of many, many weeks now of us all facing different forms of, I don't know what the term would be, aggression, confrontation, reputational assaults. All these things come to mind that have really attempted to break up the people on Substack and to put us in silos. So we're not in the united front in order to expose what this regime is doing. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. We're also going to talk about Amanda Ungaro and the interview I did with her the other day and what it means about Melania Trump. You know, did Melania know what was going on? Did Melania, in fact, participate in the deportation of her best friend? And then why? Because we've got brand new details about why that may all have happened. And then Lev has also got a big story that's developing out of the Epstein files, and that is about the new book by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan. This is a book that is revealing about what happened in the Situation Room and provides, apparently, transcripts from actual audio tapes. Is this true, Lev, that they've got actual audio tapes of what happened in the Situation Room?
Yeah, not only that, but they're actually releasing excerpts with the book. This is the crazy part. They're releasing excerpts with the book, and I have a statement from 12 of the survivors and more adding on to it as they're finding out. I'll read the statement to you guys later during the show, but they sent me a statement to this too. So yeah,
I mean, that's a really interesting topic. We'll get to that in a second. Plus, we'll take all your questions, anything you want to talk about. We'll be here till 2:00, and we're happy to hear from you guys because it's been a while since we've been together. How are you guys? Let's just catch up with everybody. How are you doing, Ellie?
Yeah,
it is the last day of school, so everything's like, so now I have to figure out how to do the Substack thing with 4 kids at home, but we'll do it.
Highly entertaining. It's going to be great. Last time they were home, I remember them like popping in with like all sorts of homework. And no homework, it's just playing. Play this and this.
Get ready for mine are all already home, and it's like you hear them in the background. You'll hear them, but this is what Substack Live is about, guys. I hope
I take a page from Waj's book because Waj always has kids popping. I'm like, if Waj can do that, then I can do that.
Yeah, people love it, I think. Well, let's talk a little bit about Amanda Ungaro then and set up that story. Sorry, Lev, you haven't told us what you're up to. Say hello and give us an update.
Hey, everyone. No, I've been a lot under the weather the past couple of days, but we're working on some very important stuff behind the Epstein survivors, which we'll get to in a little bit. We'll talk about some of the stuff I can or cannot talk about, but a lot of important stuff. But some of the stuff that I think are important that, like you touched on, that we need to talk about is definitely about the unification of our community, making sure that there is no division and some bad actors or stuff like that. But also, I think an extremely, extremely important topic is that the media, not only legacy media, but even certain so-called independent journalism on here is not really doing the job. Like, to give you an example, like this story that you're breaking about Amanda Ungaro, when I spoke to Lisa Phillips and some of the survivors, and like, it's incredible that nobody else is talking about it. Like, this is like some really, and we're going to get into it. And I apologize. I'm just a little pissed off at that nobody else is talking about this stuff, because we have more than 2, but we have 2 major breaking stories here, folks. One about Amanda Ungaro, Epstein survivor, that it goes directly to the first wife, the first lady, may be complicit in everything that is going on, to Epstein survivors that are now being again relived and being used as a tool for others to make money on instead of bringing the information. So, and nobody else is like, except for Zev, Ellie, Dean, Waj, same names, and that's why I apologize, but go ahead, Zev.
Also Becca Day has been doing some great work on this, and she's been revealing a lot of the information. So also we should share some of the credit there. Let me show you who Amanda Ungaro is, because there are many photographs just like this, where Amanda Ungaro and her former partner, the man she describes as the father of her child, Paolo Zampolli, are pictured with Melania Trump and Donald Trump. They were best of friends. The inauguration, it was this couple that was at the table with Donald Trump, the first inauguration, with Donald Trump and Melania Trump. This has been going on for decades. They're being close friends because, just in the face of it, Amanda has got a lot in common with Melania. She was also a model scouted out of Brazil, where Melania was scouted out of Slovakia. But, they both went through the same system of, let's call it a pipeline of modeling, maybe escorting, maybe human trafficking. It just gets on and on and on. We all know that story pretty well. But after decades of being friends, there was a big custody battle between Amanda and Paolo about their son that got quite nasty. And during that process, Amanda, who'd now left Paolo Zampolli and is now living in Miami with her new husband and has a new business, gets these trumped up charges put against her about her being, faking a medical license and stuff like that, which she has not done. But the idea was just to get her out of the country. So by painting her as a criminal, they could then deport her using ICE. And ICE showed up in the morning, 10 ICE officers, as ICE officers do. They were not very polite, went in, grabbed her, and then she found herself in 3.5 months in ICE custody before she finally asked the judge to deport her back to Brazil because she didn't want to stay in those facilities anymore. Now, it turns out that she is convinced, and I am too, that Paolo Zampolli is the guy who did this to her. Paolo works for Donald Trump in the Trump regime. He is an ambassador. He's got some weird title about global partnerships, but he remains one thing, very close to the First Lady. He has been really Melania Trump's shadow for decades. From the very first time that she moved to the United States, it was Zampolli who brought her into the country, who organized a visa, who organized everything for her, who got her the first modeling gigs, you name it. And they talk on a regular basis. They are, for all intents and purposes, very, very close, maybe even the closest of friends that Melania Trump has. So you have to wonder, not only did Melania Trump know about what was going on with Amanda, which is pretty likely that she did because Amanda actually had this asked to the First Lady and she acted shocked, but then did nothing about it. Now, the First Lady could probably have gotten Amanda out of ICE custody in about 3.5 minutes if she picked up the phone and called Homeland Security and said, hey, that's my best friend. Can you please get her out? There's been a big mistake. Probably she could have done that. She didn't do a thing. So you've got to ask, was she involved in the scheme basically to get rid of her best friend out of the country? And if she was involved in the scheme, why is she so nervous about it? Because she showed up in April during this press conference we all remember, where she denied having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. She denied even knowing Jeffrey Epstein, all these things which are basically impossible to be true. Untruth, I should say. That she is, it's just hard to believe that she's not involved in this whole escapade. So now we've got Amanda Ungaro, who's stuck in Brazil, who's done her first big live interview with me on Narativ, and she's describing this world that she and Paolo Zampolli inhabited. And lo and behold, in my investigation, there are a lot of Russians involved in Zampoli's universe, including 3 specific agents that we know came from Russia's FSB. Now, why would he have all those people around him? Because that to me begins, I don't know, Lev, you might have an opinion on this, but it looks to me like a Russian cell that was hiding in the United Nations around Zampolli, because that's where he did a lot of his work.
I mean, you're going back those days. This is why a lot of people don't understand. The 90s, the 80s, the late 80s, the early 90s, even the late 90s, especially when the fall of the Soviet Union, and we keep going back to it, and why it's such an important. That is when this basically it's like. The Cold War ended, and there was an fluctuation of all of this wealth and all of these immigration and money, and there was just so much that was happening. And back then, we did not have the same technology we have now. when it comes to banking. We don't have the same rules, that we have now after 9/11. We don't have the same. So it was a lot different world, and a lot of us don't realize that. We think about, oh, how could they get away with these things back then? Back then, like, just think about when Ellie does her research, the emails only go back so far because we didn't have emails in 1990. We didn't have cell phones. There was, we had beepers back then, so it was the technology changed, things changed, the ways of life changed. So yes, but the 90s was a major part of Russia. Was when the KGB was falling apart, when the Soviet Union was falling apart. Part of the way they were able to survive and was to spread out the so-called oligarchs at the time. They were connected back to the Kremlin to be able to make their enclaves in different parts of the world. United States, the UK, and now, and you're seeing all this flourish, and a lot of it had to do through honeypots. A lot of it had to do through females, some of them willingly, some of them unwillingly, but it was a combination of a melting pot, which connected directly to powerful people like Epstein, like Zampolli, like Trump, they were all in. That's what we say, the Epstein class.
Yeah. And Ellie, you've studied the modeling world that we're talking about here, this pipeline of models that came from all over the world, but a lot of them came from Russia. A lot of them came from Brazil, some from South Africa, you name it. But this was really a pipeline for a lot of these countries like Russia, who maybe had malign interests, to seed their intelligence assets or organized criminals within the pipeline of models that were coming into America. And what a nice way to do it. You had these beautiful women who had a credible cover story right away, that they could be placed next to famous people, wealthy people, and influential people in America.
Yeah, I'm actually talking to Carly Riley right after this, and she has really dug into the modeling industry portion of this. But I think, what we've seen both through like the JP Morgan, U.S. Virgin Islands court cases, and then in this last deposition with Jean-Luc Brunel's bookkeeper, is there was a massive system of bringing in these girls from other countries, especially Eastern Europe, especially Russia, one after the other. I don't know how many girls they signed off to get these Einstein visas, but it was a system that Epstein put into place after his first court case because he wanted everything to be structured. So he just started signing off. And they have these two people down at, I don't know what office they would have worked at, like immigration, who are just signing off on all the Einstein visas and all the girls coming in. And then when JP Morgan was sued by the U.S. Virgin Islands, they had these sort of financial forensics investigators go in, and they found out there was 134 bank accounts for girls from Eastern Europe that Epstein was putting money into, but the girls were not receiving money out of. This was not going into their bank accounts, because if he was paying them for massages or whatever, they were being paid in cash. So you had these bank accounts where money was going to somebody via their bank accounts. And when you looked at the bank accounts, their birth dates were not on them, their social security numbers, nothing was on them. All that was on them was their name and their country of origin. And they didn't have to be in the room, excuse me, for these bank accounts to be made. Jeffrey Epstein was in the room to make these bank accounts. So
that's extraordinary. I mean, just that is extraordinary, that they could open bank accounts for other people who are foreigners and just say, we'll take the passports and here's the bank account, and start money laundering through it. That is incredible.
Well, that's a great point. And I'm sorry, just if we could stop on that for a second, because that is exactly what I'm saying. Back then, banking was not the same. Like, you just think about this. I'll give you a crazy part. Like, we were going somewhere on a plane with the kids, and how you go through ID, you have to give all this. I remember before 9/11, I used to buy tickets on different names. There was nobody ever checked your driver's license when you.
Right.
We didn't have to. Back in the 90s, you could get on it to buy a ticket as Joe Smith, and it didn't matter, and go. Nobody checked. It was a different world.
And no metal detectors, no anything.
No metal detectors. So they were able to. That's why what Ellie's saying was so important. All of these powerful people were able to, and they controlled the banks. They were able to use the banking systems and use a lot of these women to be able to set up accounts and dummy chains, dummy event, and they did so many criminal activities. Like, one was a big, I remember, $8 billion tax fraud that the mafia, the Russian mafia, was involved with by setting up these dummy chains to take tax money off gasoline. going back over there, setting up. But also, just to add to that point, Ellie, to what Ellie's talking about, I think we should touch on is Melania is not the only one. There's others that are still here that are married, that are living inside of Trump world, that are living inside of some of these powerful women that are still connected to the Kremlin, that have always been connected to the Kremlin. It's a tight, and that's why Zampolli, the connection is incredible. I'm sorry.
But Melania, and we'll get back to what Ellie was saying in a second. Just one little point here is Melania is the only one to be first lady. I mean, that's just a different stratosphere.
They got lucky.
But she's very important. She's the first lady.
Yes.
Ellie, we interrupted you a little bit because you were talking about the money flowing through the modeling agencies, but you're also describing the bigger world there. So, can you go back and pick up from where you were and just describe this broad operation to bring these women and place them in America?
I think a lot of it had to do, again, like the system changed when Jeffrey Epstein got out of jail the first time. He got spooked. He wanted it to be more structured. He didn't want to have as many red flags. So he, instead of bringing all these girls out of Palm Beach and, who were clearly underage, he started bringing girls in from other countries, but he wanted them to have visas so that there was no, flags on their record, on his record. And so he started bringing in girls. And a big part of that had to do with Jean-Luc Brunel's modeling company, MC Squared, because Jean-Luc was very flippant. He didn't care about anything. He didn't care about rules. He didn't care about what he wrote in emails. He was not secretive about anything. And he freaked Epstein out. Epstein didn't want to talk about anything, anything in emails. He wanted everybody to be here legally. And so they started this system of the Einstein, using the Einstein program to bring the girls in. And one of those girls was Nadia Marchinkova, who there's been sort of, even I think the New York Times said she was 18 years old, and there's validation that she was 14 when she came here.
Wow.
Without her parents, because she came from a communist country where they could not travel with her. And she did escape when she got to the US. She tried to take off and she was brought back to him and then groomed and then sent to flight school and that type of thing. But she was a really perfect example of an underage girl who was brought in, given an Einstein visa. She didn't sign off on anything. And then she was here in the country legally and nobody was following up on her. But there were other celebrities, and the one I can think of is David Blaine, but there were other celebrities coming to Epstein asking him to sign off on Einstein visas for the women that they wanted to bring in as well. So this was a whole system, and it's really interesting because we have this deposition transcript of this woman named Maritza, and I forget, Maritza Vazquez, and in it, they didn't redact anything. It's a perfect example of a violation of the Transparency Act, but in it, they name, a long list of girls who are 13, 14, and 15 coming from Brazil. And then they also name all the people who were signing off on all the Einstein visas and all the people who were in charge of that program, which I thought was very interesting because they still are working in it. You can still reach out to these people. And that would be something that could be investigated, because I find that system, the modeling and the visa program through modeling in the 1990s was incredibly corrupt, and it fed into this sex trafficking.
Especially because they never made any money off these modeling agencies.
No.
It was perpetually bankrupt. Yeah. So, the MC2, by the way, is Epstein's modeling agency. He just called it MC2 to refer to E, which E was Epstein. And he basically funded the whole thing through JP Morgan and had an office in Tel Aviv, which I always thought was really interesting. But they never made a cent,
No.
Yeah. And not only that, but I'll give you another little tidbit. Back then in 1991, you were able to buy a real US passport for $10,000. Real US passport for $10,000. Yeah, it's just so you understand. So a lot of these people that are in this country are in this country because back then, before computers were just evolving, you had people sitting inside these agencies that would issue it, and if you knew the right person inside the right agency. So I remember a driver's license was $500 back then.
That was Paolo Zampoli's business, by the way. He sold diplomatic passports for $250,000 a shot.
There you go.
And he was an ambassador to Dominican Republic, which is interesting because he's not from there. But he is also it turns out that particular republic is a cover for Russia and other intelligence agencies in the world to buy passports and place people in the United States. So it's just another, sphere of fraud and real intrigue that's going on at the United Nations as he's selling these diplomatic passports. But I want to get back to the modeling, and I think this is the clip I have. I hope it's the right one. I might be a little bit of a roulette here. We'll see what happens. But I think this is about her traveling on. This is Amanda Ungaro traveling on a plane that would turned out to be the Lolita Express, and finding out that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were on board along with 30 young girls.
Express.
Wow. And how old were they, do you think?
15, 14, 16. Was a mix.
And what were they doing on the plane? Just traveling?
Well,
or just...
They were engaged very well. Ghislaine were engaged with the girls, like, best friends. And I saw some girls like on like his legs, like, they're like they look like they all know each other. And I felt very uncomfortable. So Jean-Luc Brunel introduced me to Jeffrey, and he said, "Hi, are you Brazilian? Where are you from? How old are you?" And then came Ghislaine, the same. They were super nice, but I felt super uncomfortable. I sit and I didn't talk with anyone, like, until I arrived in New York. I thought there's something wrong, was not normal. I thought, Jean-Luc, listen, who is these girls? Like, oh, they're models. I'm like, they don't look like models. They look like students,
Stunning when you think about it. 30 girls surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, flying into the United States. Amanda Ungaro is among them, but she only met Jeffrey Epstein once. That was her only meeting with Jeffrey Epstein. But she already knew at that age, and she was only 16 at the time, that the girls on that plane were not models. They were underage girls or young girls. They were doing all sorts of things, but they were not models. They weren't professional like models. They weren't acting like models. They didn't look like models. So everyone was aware, even back then, that this is what was going on. This is not a secret. Everyone knew that the Lolita Express was what it was.
Right. And Jean-Luc Brunel, so when I was reading Maritza Vasquez's deposition, she said the front of the MC squared models was specifically for bringing girls into the US. She said that they had to fake the receipts to give to Jeffrey Epstein to show that they were making money, because they never actually made any money at all, because none of the girls were actually modeling. There were several girls who they would be shipped off to do a modeling gig, and then they'd be asked to do something that they weren't willing to do, like go on someone's private yacht at night and without an adult. And they just said, "I'm not going to do that," which I thought that was incredibly brave of them at the time. And then that person would say, "Well, then I'm not going to pay you. I'm not going to do the modeling job with you." But Jean-Luc Brunel never made a cent on that modeling company at all. But he faked it so that Epstein would think he was getting his money worth.
But Epstein must have known as well that he was not making any money. Yeah.
They all knew.
Yeah.
Listen, back then, the modeling thing, and that's why we forget about Donald Trump, and he was just like that. He also had the Miss Universe pageant. None of these
Trump
things
models.
made money.
He had a modeling
Trump
agency.
models, yeah, none of these things made money. It was a way that back then in the 90s, 80s, it was a way of, surrounding yourself with young girls, and they took it to the extreme. Epstein just graduated. He started off with going after young girls that were from very, broken families that were easily taken with wealth. That's how they got them, with wealth. Just think about the places we're talking about, the Soviet Union, Brazil. In those days, you're talking about girls that don't have food on the table. Now they're sitting in a private plane. They're sitting in caviar, champagne.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? 14, 15 years old. I mean, the psychological warfare, the attack, the what's it called? You know what I'm saying to you? It was a different type of the way they did it. I mean, it was just, sick and disgusting.
Yeah, Amanda describes her experience with Paolo Zampolli as captivity. She said she was there for 20 years. She didn't get access to a passport. She couldn't really get away. She had her son, so she didn't want to leave her son behind. So she just, she was stuck in this captive world and not being able to do anything about it. I mean, that's a remarkable place to find yourself when you're a successful model. She was successful at 16 as a model, and suddenly found herself being swept up by this guy, by Paolo Zampolli, at the age of 17. And her whole life changed. Now, that relationship turned out to be very, very difficult. However, the thing that she keeps pointing out to is how close Paolo Zampolli is to Melania Trump. And I was going to play a little bit of that tape where Melania came out and made that announcement about Jeffrey Epstein. Let's just listen to a minute of this, because it's striking how much of the story she gives away when she's not intending to. I'll move her along a little bit here.
I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence. My polite reply to her email doesn't amount to anything more than a trivial note. I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998. This initial encounter with my husband is documented in detail in my book, Melania.
Yeah, her documentation of her book.
In my book, yeah. Oh, we got to plug the book.
Yeah.
2000.
Oh, she's still going on. Let me stop her.
So
Stop
that
her.
voice, please, that voice is cringy.
Yeah. So, but that's all untrue, because Epstein did introduce Melania to Donald Trump. We've seen that in the Epstein files, and there's documents. I put them on Narrative. Everyone can read them. Lots of people say that that's the case, that in fact she was introduced to Donald Trump via Epstein. Some people say she was introduced as an escort. Some people say she was introduced just as a flame, as a I don't know. I'll use Dean's word here, although I don't like it, a side piece for Donald Trump, and that they had
He said it himself.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, and this is we forget, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Donald Trump himself says it. If you look at one of the interviews, and I posted it a while ago on Substack, he says that he was with Marla Maples at the time. He was going to a party, and somebody was supposed to introduce him to somebody.
Right.
And then he came there, and then he saw Melania, and he said, "Forget her. Who is her?"
Good point.
So he was already with somebody. This was supposed to be either a side piece, escort, whatever. And Melania knew it, because she knew, and she says Donald Trump was there with somebody else. So it wasn't like, we gotta just listen to what they're saying sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you make of that, Ellie? What do you make of the First Lady's sort of preemptive statement? No one was talking about her having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein at all. She shows up and starts talking about it.
It's like those memes where you're like, me, ask nothing. You divulged everything. Something interesting about Melania that I've learned from, I guess, just people like hopping into my DMs is she had a fairly big social circle with a lot of women, and she burned all of them. There's a long list of women waiting to just like drop bombs on the things that she's saying, and I just posted this in the comments, but one of them is that her accent is completely fake, that is not what she sounds like when she's talking with her family, but she trumps it up because she's in front of an audience, and it also keeps sort of a boundary around her so people don't ask her questions because they don't think she can speak the language. She's been in America for 28 years. Like she knows, she speaks very good English. So I find that interesting. But again, it's like, when she was doing this, I was just hopping on a plane. And so, the world was burning down at the moment. But it was interesting because she was dropping these little tidbits that, eventually led to Amanda Ungaro. But also she mentioned the Daily Beast. So I think there was some worry about like some of the information that maybe Michael Wolff has on his tapes about, Trump from Epstein. And again, it was like, nobody was asking, what are you doing? Like,
she was responding to what Amanda Ungaro did say on Twitter. I mean, Amanda Ungaro threatened a lot of things on Twitter, but she never said you had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. She just said, I'm going to bring you down. I'm going to go after you, whatever, paraphrasing there. Yeah. But she was responding to these Twitter tweets. I mean, that's so you've got a motive for what brought Melania out.
It's
Yeah,
called
so-
getting
I would
ahead of the
really like to
story.
see the private text messages because I'm guessing there was a very long text thread that preceded
It was all
that
public.
conversation.
Amanda just responded to a
Yeah.
tweet that was put out by.
Don't you think she has Melania's phone number? Don't you think that they would probably be?
Oh yeah. No, they're really close. They're really, really close, which is why this is such a stunning story.
Yeah.
That this is after Amanda Ungaro comes out of 3.5 months of being in an ICE prison camp, which can't be a nice experience. I mean, it just can't. She's lost her son now. She lives in Brazil. Paolo Zampolli has organized all this and was also trying to get her imprisoned in the United States first for 6 years for a crime she didn't commit. They wanted her out of the way, and they had a reason to want her out of the way because Amanda Ungaro actually knows what Paolo Zampolli really is. And he is running a intelligence cell, or at least had these intelligence assets that we know are like Putin's gymnast consort's best friend or colleague. Then there was another one called Svetlana. I was getting her name wrong, and I'm going to screw it up again. Wait, I'll get it for you. I don't want to screw it up. But it's she also worked for Jeffrey Epstein, the same person, and the person who signed off on her Einstein visa is Sergei Belyakov, the former deputy minister of economics in Russia, who was tied to Jeffrey Epstein, who was basically Jeffrey Epstein's Russian handler. So all these people from Putin's circle end up working for Zampolli. That's weird. That's not normal. That's not a coincidental thing. He's hiring them for a sports organization and to work for the Dominican Republic, and he's hiring these Russian women who happen to be connected to Vladimir Putin. That's an orchestrated placement of spies, basically, in the UN to do whatever they need to do and to give them diplomatic passports while they were doing something else.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Ellie,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
please.
Nick, you go. I was just going to say the misstep he did is he got between a woman and her child, right? We
Yes.
might not be talking about any of this.
Yeah.
He stepped between a mother and her child. And just
that's right.
speaking as a mom, like that is the point when we would commit murder, honestly. Like that's the one thing you do to somebody where they pull out all the stops and they will do whatever it takes to get their child back. And so if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be talking about him, but he stepped in between her and her child. And that's usually the last moment for sanity for most women.
Now, you were in this Trump world, Lev. You were there. I mean, when Paolo Zampolli was, and he still is, best friends. He's the longest living friend that we know of that Donald Trump has had. I think their friendship started in 1985. Now, did everyone know this about Paolo Zampolli? Did everybody know that he was, had these Russian assets basically working for him at the United Nations?
It's interesting because I was never in his social circle. I was never in Donald Trump's. I was never part of that social elite. I was never a billionaire. I was the guy that they sent to do the dirty work, to get. So, I don't know Paul. I never heard his name or any of these names come up while I was in Trump's world, but I remember some of these names coming up through the 90s or like through Miami. Like Miami was a very hot, Miami, New York. These were like two very hot spots when it came down to Russian girls being sent over. I remember, the modeling agencies a lot of them were down here in Miami and South Beach, and in New York or South Beach. So there was a lot of that interconnection going on, with these names that, from that era, I remember. But
did people know that Donald Trump was a Russian asset back then? Did people know?
No.
They had no idea.
No.
And Melania, did anyone suspect, Melania comes from that part of the world. Ivana had, the same kind of suspicion around her being an intelligence asset. Did anyone ever ask, is Melania Trump a Russian spy?
I don't think, until now, people are starting just to open their eyes because of some of the investigative reporting we're doing, that we're breaking, the Epstein files are showing up, because you have to understand the fluctuation of women from Eastern Europe when the fall of the Soviet Union came, because when we say Russia, you're talking about you're talking about Ukraine, you're talking about Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, you're talking about Moldavia, you're talking so many different countries now that are separate, that were part of that were just like a wave that was sent in here. Now, we're not even talking about Brazil and others that back then in the 90s, they were able to use it was very easy for them to be able to use all of these different loopholes to be able to get visas and to get these girls in here for their own personal, it was say model, but it was about when they would go out that they wanted to have 30 girls around them.
Yeah.
It was that type of impression that they wanted to perceive.
I just noticed the time, and I know we only have 12 minutes left. Is that right? Or
So we should talk
longer.
about
Let's talk about some
story.
other things, and we'll get back to this story about Amanda Ungaro a little later on as well, because this is not
We'll
going
do a
away.
part two. We should do a part two, maybe
Yeah, we need a
tomorrow or
part
the day
two.
There's
after.
lots more to
We'll
it.
Definitely, yeah.
But Ellie, you've got a tight deadline here, right? You're gonna
Yeah, I've
hard
got to
out.
do another one at 2:00.
So
but I wanted to hear Lev's story. I wanted to hear what he's working on.
Lev, go for it.
Yeah.
So we're working on a couple of things. So the first thing is right now, majorly, the story that broke a week ago, where basically Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan were talking about that they were got audio recordings from the skiff, that they're now leaking excerpts. There's a book coming out having to do with that. Basically, J.D. Vance they were thinking about talking about doing the Insurrection Act, but it was all based around how to cover up the Epstein files, how to protect Trump, and also this was the same time when Blanche was supposed to go meet with Maxwell before she got transferred over. This was a very crucial time, very important time when the Epstein files. Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan are journalists. They're not book writers. They might be book writers also. They might have several things that
they've done very well, actually. I think
right.
At least Swan has. Maybe
yes.
I don't know, but yeah.
But listen, I mean, they might, but they're journalists. They work for the New York Times, and they break news, and they go on CNN, and they go on these channels, and they, are also talking about fighting for democracy, the survivors, and all of that. And when we found out that all of a sudden that they're using, basically the survivors now to promote their book, and when some of the survivors found out, they got really upset. They got really, really hurt and upset, and they put out a statement. If you don't mind, if I could read you the statement.
Yeah, go for it.
We have there's over, I think, 15 survivors already that signed on to it. I'm sorry, 1 second. I apologize.
While you're doing that, let me just say, it's not that unusual for journalists to hold things for books. It's not a great thing about journalists, but
Correct.
They are also people, and they see the big money, and they say, okay, I've got this this immediate piece of information, but it's not urgent that it comes out right now. I can hold it for a few months and that's one of the things that journalists do, is they can time out their stories. They can place it wherever they want. But what you're saying is, it's urgent that the stuff gets out, and it has to happen now.
Well, I think it's not just these journalists. I think it's a way we have to understand, because we also had the same thing with Woodward when he came out with his book about Trump and COVID, and millions of people died. So I mean, there has to be a fine line when if you're hearing all of a sudden that we might go to World War III and the world is going to exload. I think you have a common, you're not going to hold it back.
Don't sit on that story.
Sit on that story, right? So the fact that, again, I understand journalism, and I'm not trying to attack journalism, and this could have been a story that still would have written after, when they released it. The story would have still been there. But here's a statement on behalf of the survivors are Lisa Phillips, Lara Bloom McGee, Charlene Rochard, Audra Lynn Fasano, Marina Losardo, Wendy Pesante, Jenna Lisa Jones, Andrea Sterling, and then Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, and Jane Doe 3 signed it. So far, this has only been yesterday. Today, on behalf of the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein Abuse and Trafficking Network, we are responding to the release of Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's book and the reported inclusion of disturbing Epstein-related information that was not made public when it was first known. For survivors, it's not about politics, media, competition, publishing, or book sales. This is about justice. Information connected to Jeffrey Epstein, his associates, the people who enabled him, and the institutions that protected him belong in the hands of survivors, investigators, law enforcement, Congress, and public. It should never be withheld for months and then released as part of a commercial book release. Survivors have already endured decades of silence, delay, sealed records, broken promises, institutional failure. They have watched powerful people avoid accountability while the truth has been selectively released, buried, or timed for someone else's benefit. That pattern must end. if journalists, publishers, government officials, law enforcement agency, court, political institutions, or any other individual possess Epstein-related information that could help expose the network, identify those who enabled, abused, or bring accountability to survivors, it must be disclosed responsibly and without unnecessary delay. Survivors are not storylines. Their trauma is not content. Their pursuit of justice should never be timed around a publishing schedule, media rollout, or financial gain. Survivors have waited long enough. They can no longer, there can be no more selective transparency, no more delay, no more profit from survivors' pain, while accountability remains out of reach. The truth must come out now. So that was a statement again. And
Did
I
you go to
spoke
them with this, Lev? Did you bring them this story idea or this, this I don't know how you describe it, this issue? Did you bring it to them, or did they come to you?
So it was kind of same time, because I'm working with them very closely on something else that I can't go into, that we'll be discussing in a few weeks, hopefully some major breaking news to be able to get accountability. So we've been working I've been working very close with a lot of the survivors and Ellie, and we've been, and just we talk every day. And when this came out, I published something on Substack, and I don't know if Lisa saw it or I mentioned it. I don't remember who came first, but we started talking about it, and she was really, really upset about it. She was taken back, and she called the sisters, and they were all upset, that there was, again, it wasn't the point that the information came out, because it was the point that they were trying to then monetize a book over it, because they all understand that sometimes, look, journalists, sometimes you can't get the story out as quickly as we want it, because they have to verify it and validate it, and there's a lot of, especially with the names that are involved. And that's one of the reasons why I started going a little bit after independent journalism. And again, not to divide, or maybe just like a wake-up call, because like, think about what we just spoke about here in the past 40 minutes. Your story about Amanda Ungaro. I mean, just think about all the explosive bombshell stuff we're talking about that leads directly to the First Lady. Think about what we're talking about right now, about a story about the Vice President of the United States and the Attorney General and the FBI Director sitting in the secured skiff talking about how they're going to maybe use the Insurrection Act to cover up the biggest cover-up in the scandal, the Epstein file. So we're seeing all of this play out, and I understand legacy media is not going to report on it because it's already bought, paid for, and sold. But I'm a little bit upset. Without, again, I'm not going after anybody. No, please don't take me the wrong way. But I want a wake-up call, because what I'm seeing play out, and this is, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the attacks also on independent journalism, is I'm seeing it happen again, because some of the bigger accounts, some of the bigger journalists are turning certain platforms into, again, like, no difference than if you turn on CNN or MSNBC, or you turn on some of these Substack platforms. You're looking basically same information, same regurgitation, same, get that guest on, or get, because he has that
credentials. Booking war.
A booking war, exactly. Instead of, and I realized it because, like, I would have breaking news, and I would call these people and say, "Oh, we need to go on right now. I got this breaking news." They were like, "Well, I'm booked till next Tuesday."
Yeah.
I'm like, next Tuesday. Like,
I get that line too from people.
I said by next Tuesday, that news is, we'll have. So I think that, that's why these bots and this operation that we're being attacked, like Ellie right now, Yuzev, I was attacked by certain people, are able to do that, because we're like held in the dark. Like we're like, our information is not being produced.
It doesn't get valued in the same way as a New York Times reporter or somebody else coming out with the same information, even though it might be
Shalev, right? It's
more accurate.
It's not the New York, right? It's not the New York Times. So
did Maggie and Jonathan respond to any of any of these articles you put out, or the statement?
No, they have not responded to us. They have not responded to the survivors, and I've also sent this article out to a lot of independent journalists, and I'm surprised that yesterday I put out a little post on Substack, because like I'm a little dumbfounded. I'm dumbfounded how this is not a bigger story. How they're instead promoting. The journalists are talking. And I even between
the story is quite good. I mean, the details that Maggie and Jonathan are revealing are good and important stuff.
Well, that's the whole thing, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you this much: like, you know me, I don't hold back. I had Congressman Rokana on my show 8 months ago, and this was when he was just starting out with Manasseh, and they were going into it, and this is before he would go on any shows. He came on my show, and on my show, I told him 50% of the stuff that is breaking right now, we spoke of. If you go back to my Substack, you'll see me and Rokana, and I told him, I said, the key is Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino's telling you, Susie. Well, I mean, we laid out
I
everything
remember that.
that's fascinating, but because it was me talking about it and not Maggie Haberman or the New York Times, that nobody did anything. And now, you see all these Congress people, and again, I'm not trying to go say anything bad about them, but they're waving this New York Times article saying, oh my God, we have explosive stuff. 8 months ago, they were doing it. The fact is, what's the point of then independent journalism? What's the point of whistleblowers? What's the point of investigative journalism? What's the point of all of this if we're sitting here risking like our freedom? We're not getting paid the big bucks to do what we're doing, and then you come in. So I have a lot. Again, it's not about breaking my story. I'm not a journalist. I don't even, me, Zev. I said I want everybody.
It's not your
to break
beef,
the
really.
story.
You're raising
not,
it as an issue.
It's not my beef. I'm not a journalist. It's not like somebody scooped my story. That's the opposite. I wanted them to they should have been reporting on it more, and I don't need the credit for it. But the fact that they're trying to monetize it, it really hurts the.
Well, I mean, it's just important that every source is credited when stories come out. And I know, Ellie, we're going to run out of time here, so I want you to be able to have a little bit
I
of
was
a
just going to say
well.
really quick on that, like the timeline wise, they must have known about that meeting and heard what happened in that meeting really shortly after the meeting occurred, because if you think about how long it takes to write a book and publish a book, and now they've done both those things in 8 months, that's really, really, really fast. So they would have had to have that information right away. So that means they've been sitting on the audio tapes of that meeting since probably before Ghislaine Maxwell was moved up, which would have been really important to know at the time, because then all of a sudden she had a proffer and she was moved. If they knew about that before, that was really vital information that the survivors should have known at the time. And so I think that's my issue with them sitting on it, is that would have been important for the House oversight. That would have been important for the survivors. That could have kept Ghislaine Maxwell in place where she was prior, because there's no way that they, sat on that information for 6 months, wrote a book, and published it 2 months later. Like that's impossible.
That's the only issue, because nobody cares about them making money. If they would have given the information, because I speak to the survivors, they're like, listen, if they would have handed over the information to intelligence, they could have still wrote the book. The book still would have been sensational. I mean, still they got records. I mean, this is still big stuff.
Yeah, it's a great book, and there's lots of good stuff.
Right. There's a lot of important stuff, but the timing of it now, like Ellie says, Maxwell wasn't moved yet. Bondi was still the attorney general.
That's really the issue here.
Dan Bongino was still there, and now is a podcast. I mean, you had so much 8 months. Just think about everything that transpired over the 8 months that could have went totally different if we knew that this is what they were doing. Well, we knew. I mean, if the world would have listened.
Look, I mean, there's news that you sit on because it's you can break it later, but then there's news that if you don't release it today, it's going to impact the whole story. And journalists have to stay out of the way of the story. They can't be inserting themselves into the story by holding back information. I mean, that's just not acceptable. Now, if it's years later and you find something that's not relevant to today's news, sure, hold it for your book. But if you have something that you can really influence the day's events, you have to put it out there as a journalist. You just have to. That's the job. But maybe not all people think that. Ellie, I don't want to cut that topic that you want to bring up short, and I think we are going to have to, because it's now too.
Yeah, we may have to do another.
Let's do another.
Let's do a part two, because the topic is important, and I think we should dive more into the Amanda Ungaro story. I think there's more to talk about there. I think I'd like to talk a little bit more about what plays out. Why don't we schedule another one, and we could get back to seeing if we get anything response from Maggie Haberman or Jonathan Swan. See if anybody picks up, we could talk more about it. And then I think it's important that we talk about what me, you, and Ali want to talk about, the intimidation and some of the things that are taking out and being played here on social media.
So if people want to see the statement, it's on your website, Lev? on
Yeah,
your
I put it
Substack?
out. I put it out on Substack. I put it out as a note. The survivors are putting it out. I think Aaron just also put it out. So we're getting traction on it. I'll send it out to you guys also, so you could put it out also, and everybody just spread it. And we need to be able to, put an end to this. We need survivors have to be stopped using as pawns, no matter.
Maggie and Jonathan on Substack, just as a curiosity.
You know what?
That would be
I'm
interesting.
the crazy part is, so Jonathan Swan, his wife, is a dear friend of mine, Betsy. She actually interviewed me when I was first guy. So I'm going to reach out and try to, get Jonathan on. It's just a very tough situation because, I mean, what's he going to say? I mean, I don't want
publicity for his book. I mean, why not come on and talk about it? Just, it is promoting the book.
Yeah.
Ellie Leonard, what do you have right now on the Panicked Writer that everyone should be paying attention to? You're doing these incredible readings on a regular basis, and I missed streaming that yesterday. But
amazing.
Yeah, but it's great work that you're doing, and I'm so glad
Thank
you're doing
you.
it. Tell people about that and whatever else you want to share about what's happening.
So I've been on Wednesday and Friday nights at 9:00 Eastern. I've been reading the Epstein files as like a continuation of what happened with the filibuster at the Reading Room in New York, which is now in DC. Also including I try to put a QR code in every episode so that people can donate to like different fundraisers that help sexual assault survivors. I'm doing that. I've been doing write-ups on write-ups. I'm sort of following up every time the New York Times writes something. I explain like probably what their motivation for writing it is. I've had lots of great offline conversations with people about what do you think they mean by this? What did you take away with this? So I've been doing quite a lot of that, and I think as I head into the summer, now that all my kids are home, I'll be leaning heavily into probably writing because it's easier with children around. But yeah, that's what I'm working on.
All right. So the Panicked Writer, Ellie Leonard.
Oh, nice mic.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what that was.
Say to you, my phone went off. I have two meetings going at the same. I was telling you about.
Well, Lev, just tell people where they can find your stuff, or I can tell them it's at Lev Remembers, and or tell them everything else that you need to know about it. Getting in touch with Lev right now.
Well, the most important thing, folks, right now, I'm running for Congress as an independent in the 22nd district, Florida, but it's not just for this district; it's for everywhere. And you go to levforcongress.org. It's my website. Get all the information up there. If you can't donate, but definitely go on there to see what's happening. You'll see we have a lot of important stuff happening. We've got to take our Congress back, take our diplomacy back, and get accountability, not just for the survivors, but each and every one of American citizens out there that need their voices to be heard. So thank you, Zev.
Thank you. And that's Narrative for today. I'll be back at 3:00 with Dean and the 5 Stacks. So see you then. And thanks, guys. Thanks for being here today.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.